Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben. Ah, the 90s. By most present-day accounts, it was a savage time. 'Twas before the advent of advanced computers, when conquest and war were the way of the world. But it was also an era of bliss, lived in the ignorance of all things. No one thought sugar was bad back then. No, we downed Lucky Charms in chocolate milk with a side of Eggo waffles covered in syrup and washed it all down with a glass of orange juice because that's what was fit for growing boys and girls. God damn it, General Mills, you bastards. Cheerios is a gateway cereal, my friends, a Trojan horse that provides the means for Cinnamon Toast Crunch to spike your blood sugar. Back to the 90s though. Hey, I know it's a bit foolishly nostalgic to wax romantic about the decade. I mean, the present day is a far better, more humane, self-aware time, is it not? But am I crazy to state that there was something great about the 90s? I mean, yeah, it was a tougher world, but there was something so worthy about growing up more like this than like this. Okay, the 90s weren't that barbaric. I have to stop overplaying it, but still, there was a special vibe to the era that made it great. And that vibe permeated movies of the time as well. Today's movies are awesome, epic, high art, but sometimes they just lack that 90s je ne sais quoi. And that inarticulable factor was perhaps best emphasized in the science fiction of the time. So I thought today it would be worthy to honor 90s sci-fi movies by going over their 7 defining features. These elements together making up that unnamed trait of all things 90s. Number 8 is melodramatic heroic moments. Heroes are so much more restrained and serious nowadays. In a way, Marvel movies are an ode to some of 90s sci-fi in that they took themselves less seriously and let their heroes embrace their epicness. But 90s sci-fi was just so dramatic and yet uplifting. Everyone who has watched a 90s action flick of any kind, really, has experienced the kind of moment I'm talking about when I say melodramatic and heroic. It's the scene where you know what's about to happen, the music gets really intense, and then someone does something really stupid in order to save the day and often lots of innocent people. I mean, the decade even gave the T-Rex an inspiring heroic moment. His agent probably pushed the dino to take the role as a PR move, but the execution was successful and the scene memorable. At number 7, we have exaggerated cartoonish bad guys. I feel like the villains in today's movies are too three-dimensional. No, seriously, sometimes the realism gets to be a bit too boring. Villains in 90s movies were so colorful, so diabolically evil. They were all comic book characters, psychopaths looking to rain chaos down on the world. There was no confusion about who the villains were. I mean, there might be a plot twist that reveals someone who we thought was the hero is actually the villain, but I mean, we knew those characters were the villains the whole time, didn't we? But I digress. I like the humanized villains we see a lot of today, but a part of my heart will always be reserved for Wesley Snipes in Demolition Man, a movie that painted an eloquent portrait of the IRS's oppression of action movie stars. At number 6, we have gratuitous violence and brutality. I feel like violence in 70s movies was very mature, dark, and real. Then the 80s glitched the world, and by the 90s everything was stupid but also awesome. It was as if writers and directors were getting a kick out of testing how far they could push audiences' sensibilities. Maybe the fact that the 90s were a bit of a socially conservative time led movie makers to act out against the culture and have dinosaurs rip people apart on screen just to say screw you to the MPAA and uptight American public. That said, had I not seen Death Wish 5 as a 10-year-old, I might be a somewhat better functioning adult today. But as far as sci-fi goes, Starship Troopers is really what shocked me. It was so unnecessarily yet totally necessarily gory. The Battle of Klendathu was the sci-fi fans Saving Private Ryan D-Day invasion scene. There were stories of World War II vets sitting shocked in the theater during the latter scene. Well, so too did we Space Marines suffer mental trauma while watching the former, as we relived our experiences of the Xenos brutality. Okay, probably not a fair comparison. What is it about exaggerated gore and carnage that just makes movies so much better? I mean, can someone articulate it? Is it just me, or is it perhaps that such violence is cathartic and triggers some deep primal sense within us that when stirred arouses our darkest impulses? It's just me, isn't it? Okay then. At number 5, we have over-the-top fighting to go with the gore and violence. This was the product of the evolution of martial arts films which flourished in Hong Kong and then America in the 80s and 90s. Diminutive combatants would combine acrobatics, dance, and strikes into operatic menageries of hand-to-hand warfare cultivated just for the world of cinema. And when this style impregnated science fiction, somehow a prepossessing, groinless Belgian god was born unto the world. But it wasn't just Jean-Claude Van Damme. Martial arts and fighting in sci-fi became so over the top that it transcended silliness and skipped straight to cool. Who doesn't remember Neo fighting Morpheus in the simulated dojo? I mean, I'm not sure these slow, rigid blocks and strikes would help one last more than a second in a street fight, but that didn't stop me from practicing them in my room, alone in the dark, while also trying to fire Kamehameha waves from my hands. You know you did it too. Don't act like I'm the only one on this one. At number 4, we have dystopian and dark futures. Yeah, there's still some good dystopian settings in movies today, and some of them are really good. But there was just a certain fantastical way in which the 90s did dystopia that makes such movies so iconic. I feel like advancements in special effects during the decade made filmmakers go nuts with world creation, erecting fully living futures that, even if seemingly desperate and dangerous, still, dare I say, make you want to pay a visit to them. Okay, I'm not totally into the Terminator future, to be honest, but Judge Dredd and Total Recall I'm totally down for. I think what 90s filmmakers did that set their dystopia apart is that they made their worlds attractive and colorful rather than bleak and depressing. Technology played a huge role in the dark futures of 90s cinema, and so rather than the desolate future of Mad Max where psychopaths roam the streets, we got one in which tyranny prevails and oppresses the people by way of technological innovations. Governments became gods over the people, micromanaging and curating their lives. At number 3, we have weapons. Yeah, I mean, this is a simple one, but it's important. The weapons in 90s movies were used like special effects, often and obnoxiously, but so many of us appreciate it. Starship Troopers really stands out here, but every movie had its share of iconic and creative weapons that didn't make any sense, and that doesn't only include firearms either. Big guns definitely reign supreme, but if I had to pick a favorite, you know I have to go with the noisy cricket. Actually, as a kid, I never really understood why Agent J was so mad about that gun. I mean, yeah, the big guns were cool, but I always felt like the noisy cricket was so powerful and yet so portable. Remember, it's not the size of the gun that counts, it's how many aliens you use it on. At number 2, if we discuss the cartoonish bad guys, then we definitely have to mention the larger-than-life heroes. I mean, we could make the argument that it was the protagonists of these films that made them as special as they were. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and Wesley Snipes. Men of action, champions of the syringe. Yeah, there were others, but these guys were 90s sci-fi, and beyond really, they were action films in general. They were testosterone-fueled, witty, badass single-cell heroes who became integral parts of the American home and heart. These guys made going to the movies an exciting and devilishly entertaining affair. They weren't always the most technically sound or most intense actors, but they were damn good. And their multiple turns in the leading roles of some of the biggest sci-fi movies of all time make for characters that will never be forgotten in the minds of all who lived through the 90s. Finally, at number 1, the answer should be obvious, and we've been skating around it this whole time. No, 90s sci-fi movies weren't the most critically acclaimed, Oscar-worthy, or deeply thought out. And hey, I love when art gets deep, serious, and sophisticated. But the 90s were a time of sit back, stop thinking, and enjoy. Which is probably why the 2000s and after went to shit. The goal of 90s sci-fi was just to entertain audiences and have some fun. Every element that we talked about in this video was the way that it was because the priority was fun, to make the movie enjoyable. The 90s were a simpler time between decades of complexity, and its movies needed to fit the environment they existed within. I mean, what could be a more fun cinematic experience than Arnold Schwarzenegger uncovering a conspiracy on Mars, or Sylvester Stallone going head-to-head with Wesley Snipes in future Los Angeles? Yes, movies need to evolve as all art does, but there is a shortage of fun movies nowadays. I feel like we've lost it. Filmmakers don't know how to be simple and just have fun anymore. We could use some more 90s-like sci-fi movies, but we just don't have them. So perhaps that's why we'll keep revisiting them again and again and again, and they'll never quite grow old on us. Anyways, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments below what I missed, or if you just hate 90s sci-fi movies, actually. Remember to subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell. Gosh, I don't want to let you go. Kind of lonely here. But hey, for now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.